They say winters on the prairies teach you two kinds of patience. The kind that waits for a bus with your chin tucked into your scarf. And the kind that waits for people to come around to things they don't yet understand. I've stood in both kinds of weather. The first you dress for. The second you carry inside your coat until you can put it down somewhere that doesn't bruise. I didn't realize I'd been carrying so much of the second kind until the day my daughter told me I didn't belong at her baby shower. The words were ordinary, the way harm often is, tidy. Typed. Softened by a heart emoji at the end like a bandage pressed over a cut that didn't have to be made. My name is Marianne Lavoie. I live in St. Boniface, the old francophone neighborhood on the east side of the Red River in Winnipeg. My apartment is above a pharmacy on Provencher Boulevard, with a fire escape that squeals in protest whenever winter changes its grip on the metal. In the mornings, I walk down one flight to the back door and step into air that smells of eucalyptus pastilles and wet cardboard. It's a life built in small squares, a 2-burner stove. A table that seats 2 if one of you doesn't mind the radiator. A bedroom just big enough for a bed and a hanging rod. I could wish for more room, but I learned a long time ago to wish for warmer socks first. Most days I work 2 jobs because Manitoba bills and good intentions do not balance themselves. By 8 I am at Madame Colette's, a tucked-away alteration shop off Rue Taché with a bell that goes ding like an old cartoon. Madame is 73 and still sews faster than anyone I've met. She won't retire because, she says, what would she do? Sit at home and think about her knees? We hem jeans, repair hockey pants, shorten prom dresses, and let out suits that should have been let out months ago. I am good at what I do, not because I have magic hands, but because I listen to what fabric wants. Denim wants to be coaxed. Satin wants to be told who's boss. Wool wants to be left alone except at the edges. People are not so different. In the evenings, 3 nights a week and every second weekend, I do home support for seniors. It's not glamorous and that's half the reason it matters. I refill blister packs, thaw soups their daughters left in labeled containers, record blood pressure and sugar levels, read mail aloud, and sit quietly while the news mutters about faraway things. I grew up with grandparents who believed talk is silver and showing up is gold. If there's a better creed for winter work, I haven't heard it. My daughter, Camille, is 22. She lives across town in St. Vital with her boyfriend, Tyler, in one of those newish apartments that pretend to be downtown lofts if you squint. They have an en-suite washer and dryer and a balcony that faces a parking lot. They think the balcony is glamorous in summer when the barbecues come out and someone laughs loud enough to cover the traffic on Fermor. I hope they keep that feeling as long as they can. They're expecting a baby in March, Henry if he looks like a Henry. Elodie if she smiles the way we imagine she will. We don't know yet. The ultrasound tech smiled and said, "A surprise can be nice." Which is technician code for either she couldn't see or she didn't want to be responsible for strangers' disappointment. I respect that discretion. I've learned that staying in your lane is sometimes the kindest gift you can give to a day. When Camille told me she was pregnant, she did it with cheeks like apples and a voice that kept tripping over itself. She had worried I'd be disappointed. I surprised her by not being. If you've had a life with as many detours as mine, you learn that babies turn bad maps into roads. I hugged her and Tyler and said we would make it work. The way people in this province say we will shovel again tomorrow even if the forecast lies. I had a few quiet hours later that night where I added numbers on the back of a hydro bill, what I could spare. What the car would need once spring swallowed the salt. What a crib costs these days if you don't want splinters in your sleep. Then I slept as if I'd been carrying heavy groceries and put them down. Weeks slid along the way they do between first snow and the kind that sticks. I kept a small envelope in my handbag where I put receipts for things I bought for the baby. Flannel fabric in a gentle green, soft as a whisper. To sew a receiving blanket. A pack of newborn onesies that claim to fit for 3 weeks and then lie about it. An extra long charger because someone will be up in a chair scrolling at 3 in the morning and cords never reach far enough in real life. I put money down on a crib made from maple. Solid and plain. The salesman said it had a convertible rail for when the baby becomes a toddler. I wanted a piece of furniture one could lean on without hearing flirtations from the screws. Tyler's mother, Sharon, made contact like a woman putting a toe into a lake she's not sure is clean. She added me to a group chat, baby sprinkle heart, and then messaged privately to ask if we could let the Grants organize the shower since it's more efficient to have one side lead. She didn't say which side. She didn't have to. Her dialect of kindness is the kind that trims other people out of a photo in the name of symmetry. I said I was happy to contribute and asked what she had in mind. Her list arrived with the certainty of a woman who has never had to choose between fresh fruit and bus fare. Rented acrylic sign for the backdrop. Sage green balloons. Customized sugar cookies with baby's initials. I suggested we use the Provencher Community Hall because it's affordable and the chairs stack without complaining. She suggested a boutique event space across town that had better lighting. We settled on the community hall when the math did what math does. I put down the deposit because I was the first to walk through the door with a government ID and a debit card that clears. I told myself it didn't matter whose name was on the receipt. Only sometimes it does. Winnipeg in January is a world of small decisions. You decide how many layers to put on for the distance between here and the bus stop. You decide whether to risk the shortcut on the river path when the ice looks trustworthy and the city hasn't put the green sign up yet. You decide if you're going to learn to love your slow cooker because dinner will not cook itself between 7 and 9 at night while you're changing bandages for a man who tells you the same story in 2 languages and is delightful in both. You decide what to say when your child sends a message that arrives like a cold wind under a door. Some doors were not sealed properly when you moved in, others you left on purpose so you could hear the weather as it approaches. The message came on a Wednesday between hemming a pair of navy school pants and letting out the waist on a bridesmaid dress that had not met its owner's dessert course kindly. My phone buzzed against the pincushion, and when I wiped my fingers and looked, I saw Camille Hart and smiled before I read. Mom, it said, I think it's better if you don't come to the shower. It's kind of a friend's thing and Sharon's family wants to keep it simple. Love you. I'll send photos. A heart. Pink. As if that made the words less exact. I stood very still. Madam looked up from her machine without turning off the motor, a skill that continues to impress me. Ka va? She asked. Oui, I said, because I did not have the digestion for French just then. It's fine. It is not fine, she said, because 73 gives you rights. But she turned back to her stitches and let me find my breath. I put the phone down and finished the hem. Stitches don't forgive you because life has startled you. They pucker if you don't hold your attention steady. When the bell dinged and the customer left, Madam set her needle high and gestured to the back, which is how she says, go drink water and sit for 5 minutes, without interfering with a woman's pride. I drank from the little paper cone and felt like a child at a doctor's office. Then I washed my hands slowly with the cheap pink soap and watched the bubbles carry my face in distorted shapes. I am not a crier. That's not bravery. It's plumbing. On my way home later, I walked over the Provencher Bridge and looked down at the red The open patches were the colors that live between pewter and tobacco. A pair of ravens sat on the railing, serious as old men, and argued at a volume that made me smile. Because some creatures have the good sense not to do anything quietly. I walked into my apartment, hung up my coat, and boiled water because this is what small-town Catholics in prairie cities do when something doesn't fit in the mouth. We make tea and hold the mug until our hands understand what our head refuses. I sat at my little table and laid the receipts out like playing cards. The ink made its whispers: crib, deposit, onesies, fabric, stamps for the invitations Sharon had designed on a website and asked me to pick up. The evidence of love is boring. It has SKU numbers. I typed, "I hear you," back to my daughter. I said, "I love you," because that part was the same in any language. I did not ask if this was Sharon's idea. Camille is 22. Conversations with mothers at that age carry too much luggage to fit into one text bubble. I wrote, "I'll be close by if you need anything," and left it there. The heart she sent back had a crack through it, which I chose to read as kindness and not cruelty. Sometimes interpretation is where peace lives. I'm not good at drama. I'm good at dishes. So I washed the 2 plates in the sink, wiped the counter, and ran a cloth over the stovetop. Then I took the plastic file labeled "Receipts" out of the drawer. I have kept something like it for years. A habit formed when I realized poor people only get to be wrong once. I sorted the papers into sleeves: baby, hall deposit, groceries for the week. Then, because the body demands motion when the heart feels pinned, I put on my boots and walked to the corner store for milk and a bag of pierogi from the freezer aisle. The man at the counter asked how I was. I said, "Cold," and he nodded because that is what we do here. We let weather hold what we cannot currently say. The next morning, I biked carefully along the street. Careful to keep my wheels on the gritty part where the city had flung sand after Tuesday's snow. The air bit the inside of my nose. I wore the balaclava I hate because it flattens my face into a potato with eyes. At the shop, I worked with my head down. At lunch, I sat on the stool by the back door and watched the buses tilt as they took the curve. Louise from the bakery 2 doors down brought me a cinnamon twist unasked. And I didn't ask how she knew. We are not telepathic. We are practiced. In the afternoon, the group chat blinked with energy. Sharon posted a photo of a sample dessert table with requests for opinions. A cousin chimed in with, "So excited," and more exclamation marks than could possibly be sincere at that hour. Someone asked about games and whether we could do the one where you guess baby food flavors blindfolded. I put my phone face down and finished setting in a zipper. When I picked it up later, I saw I'd been removed as a moderator and 2 more grants added. That's how you know a decision has been made, when they change the list and pretend the list was always like that. I won't pretend I didn't feel the sting. I've worked a long time to stop being surprised by predictable disappointments. But the body still has its reflexes. You open a fridge expecting milk and find an empty shelf. You say, "Huh," and go to the store. The trip is not proof of weakness. It's a plan. I texted Camille one more time, "Do you want me to keep the crib at my place until after the shower?" She wrote back 2 words in under a minute, "It's fine." I breathed. Because people say, "Fine," when it is anything but. I let that be for the day. That evening, my schedule had me at Mr. Kowalski's, a widower who tells better jokes in his second language than most men do in their first. He was watching curling on TV, which is code for, "I don't have to talk if you don't feel like it." I refilled his tea, checked that the bathroom mat wasn't a skating rink, and made notes in the logbook. He drifted to sleep in his chair. mouth open in the soft indignity of age. When I turned off the TV, the apartment let out the small sigh buildings do when they think they're alone. I stood a minute longer than made sense, listening to a kind of quiet that is work's reward. Then I pulled on my boots and walked into a night that had decided to be colder than the radio promised. At home, I made myself something simple and sat down again with the folder. I began to write a list in my small tidy hand because making lists is how I tell myself the truth. For Camille and baby, I wrote, under it, crib, with the order number. Hall deposit, with the date. Thursday ultrasound parking, because the machines at St. Boniface Hospital swallow coins without mercy. Grocery top-up, for the week of the flu when Tyler went down and a pot of soup felt like a door held open. I didn't write any of that to prove anything to anyone. I wrote it to make sure I didn't misremember later and tell a kind story where a clear one was needed. Friday, after work, Camille stopped by on her way to the bus. She stood in the doorway with a face that showed me the whole storm before her mouth found the words. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, voice too bright. I waved her in, sat her down, handed her a mug. The city had painted the sky with that ugly orange it uses right before the snow says it meant it. We did not talk about Sharon at first. We talked about the baby rolling like a seal under her ribs and how Tyler's car wouldn't start if someone didn't sweet-talk it. And how the doctor said to watch her iron. We were good at that, walking around the volcano until our shoes got warm enough to force the truth. When she started to cry, she did it with her lips pressed together like women do when they don't want the building to know. I shouldn't have sent it like that, she said. Sharon wants it her way. She thinks you and I, that we make things messy when we're together. Do we? I asked. Because this is the kind of question you owe your child once in a while. We overwhelm her. She said we make a lot of noise. She tried to smile. She likes her balloons in sage and her cupcakes simple. Ah, I said. Yes, and I like pierogi that actually have potato in them. Humor is not a bandage. It's a lid that lets the pot stop boiling over for a second. She reached for my hand. I wanted you there. I did. She said family on our side was too complicated. That people talk. She doesn't want attention. You can't both invite the whole internet and not want attention. I said. Because I am still learning when to keep thoughts inside. But I hear you. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know, I said. I know you are. We sat a while longer. When she left, I hugged her with both arms and one cheek pressed to her hat. At the door, she looked at the crib set up in the corner of my bedroom, ready. Because I wanted to run my hands along the rail and let my body understand we had done one good thing today. It's beautiful, she said. It's yours, I answered, because my mouth had not yet caught up to my list. Saturday I worked the morning at the shop and spent the afternoon mending a quilt for a woman whose aunt had sewn too close to the edge and pulled the batting thin. When I layered in new batting, I thought of the things we put between people to make them warmer, layers of habit. Kindness. A bit of money where it counts. An invitation to stand near us even if the room is small. I thought of what it feels like to be told you don't belong when you are the one who paid for the chair you were hoping to sit in. Then I thought of my grandma's rule for hard days, if you can't be wise. Be careful. I put down the needle and made tea and took the folder out again. The truth about being poor in a city like ours is that you become an expert on the boring parts of life. You can quote return policies like scripture. You know which credit union answers the phone before the third ring and which ones send you to a queue that leaves you cold and unforgiven. You know that the community hall's deposit is refundable if the person who paid it cancels. Not the person whose cousin said he might help set up the chairs. You know which stores will pick up an item if it's still in the window when the catalog says spring, and which ones will tell you to bring it in yourself because they don't have enough staff this week. You learn these things not because you enjoy fine print but because the big print is never written with you in mind. I looked up the receipt for the haul. The deposit was in my name. The contract said I could transfer it to another date or event if I gave notice by email and included my original confirmation number. I found the email draft from the day I'd booked and typed a new one under it. Not sending, only letting the words collect themselves. Later, I checked the crib's order page. Return within 30 days by purchaser only. It was day 19. The box had long gone to recycling. No one keeps that kind of cardboard when your kitchen is a walkway, but the store would accept a pickup for donation with a tax receipt issued to the purchaser if requested. There are sentences that feel like they were written for a day you didn't know you were walking toward. That night I couldn't sleep early. The radiators huffed. The winter did its knuckle tapping on the windows. The building across the alley sang a soft hum that meant the elevator had given up again. I got out of bed and stood by the crib. Fingers on the smooth rail. I thought of my daughter and the way love can be consumed by other people's preferences if you let it. I thought of the baby and the way needs arrive without polite scheduling. I thought of how long women have been told to fold themselves into nicer shapes in rooms they prepared and paid for. I thought, too, of my pride, which has both saved and stiffened me at different times. Then I wrote 3 lines in the notebook I keep under the phone charger. Help the child, not the performance. Put support where it can't be moved without me. Do it quietly. Do it right. Sunday after church, St. Boniface Cathedral. Where the ruins make a frame for the new building and a person can feel like old and new or on speaking terms, I walked to the river. A man had carved a small passage in the snow where you could read the ice less with your feet and more with your eyes. I stood a long time, watching, and then I turned back toward where the houses start again and the street plows leave their tidy walls. At home I boiled potatoes and onions. Fried them with butter, and ate them with a little salt. If a woman can't fix the whole world on a Sunday, she can at least give herself something warm to carry inside it. In the afternoon, I sorted the sewing I'd do for the week, hockey socks for a boy who'd fallen twice on his stitches. A dress that needed darts even if its owner didn't want to be told that truth. A church banner whose crosses had come loose. I stopped. Sewed my initials on the corner of the baby's receiving blanket, old-fashioned. I know, but it steadied my hands, and placed it in a cloth bag. Then I took out the haul contract and wrote the deposit number on a sticky note. I opened an email to the manager, whose name I know because she coached my friend's kid in ringette. I kept it simple, the way you do when you want to be understood. Hello. This is Marianne Lavoie. I'm writing to request that the deposit for booking #_____ Provencher Hall. February 10th, be transferred to a future community event I'm organizing, an infant care workshop led by public health nurses. Please confirm the process and the notice required. Thank you. Regards. M. Lavoie. I didn't send it. Not yet. I closed the laptop and watched light move across the table until it left the room. Then I made a thermos for work and put my boots on and stepped into the rest of the week. You might expect a confrontation to end this part of the story, a slamming door. A dramatic call. A paragraph you copy into a group chat to win a small war. But this is Winnipeg in January. Most doors are too swollen with cold to slam. And the people who win are usually the ones who make lists first. When my phone buzzed that evening, it was Camille sending me a photo of her stomach under a sweater and a caption that said, "He's practicing karate," and I sent back laughing faces and a heart and For once. Did not try to fix a single thing. By Monday, the shop needed me early. And Mr. Kowalski needed me late. And in between I stood on the bridge and watched the river pretend to be still. If you've lived here, you know pretending is only the river's way of keeping you from worrying about what's under that gloss. The current moves even when you don't. I went home, made a cup of tea, and laid out the folder again. The top sheet was the hall deposit. Under it, the crib receipt. Under that, the list written in the small hand my daughter used to tease me about. Mom, your letters are soldiers, as if neatness were a form of discipline I should have abandoned by now. I clicked the pen. I wrote the first line of a letter to myself. Things I've done that no one sees. Then I added, it's not invisible if I can see it. I put my hand on the blanket I'd folded like a letter to the future and felt the smoothness of flannel under my palm. There are rooms you are told you don't belong in. There are rooms you build with your own 2 hands and then invite people into. With chairs and sugar and a place for their coats. If someone decides the chairs don't suit their aesthetic, you don't throw the chairs in the snow. You carry them to a place where someone will sit down gratefully. That was the picture I held in my head as I turned off the kitchen light and felt my way to bed. The forecast said the week would get warmer and then colder again. Which is how weeks arrange themselves when they want to keep you humble. I tucked the folder into my bag for the morning, set an alarm, and lay down. Before sleep found me, I rehearsed the first call I would make in my head. Not because I like drama, but because I like to get the words right. Hello. It's Marianne. I'm calling about a deposit in my name. I'd like to transfer it. Yes. I have the number. Yes. I know the date. Thank you. Breath in. Breath out. Foot on a small step. That is how you move a life from one room to another without spilling something that matters. The rest, as the old women in my building say, we will take in order. And somewhere between my apartment and the river, a list had begun to write itself with a surer hand than I had used at the kitchen table. It had 3 quiet headings: what I pay for, who benefits, and where the baby sleeps tonight. Tidy, not cruel. The sort of list that tells the truth without making a scene. The kind that would carry me into what came next. There's a certain kind of winter work that never shows up on a pay stub. You do it at a kitchen table with a pen that writes small. With receipts that whisper their little truths. With the steady breath you practice so you don't mistake irritation for wisdom. On the prairies, we learn early that big gestures won't get your car to start. A clean battery does. And if the battery is fine, maybe it's the cable. And if it's not the cable, it's your habit of listening for what's loose. I woke on the Monday after my daughter's message with that mechanic's patience. No shouting, no speeches, just a day for tightening bolts I should have checked sooner. The morning air carried that damp cold that looks like kindness and bites when you turn the corner. I rode my bike in slow circles through St. Boniface's side streets, letting the grit under the tires tell me what the city had done overnight. At the shop, Madame Colette was already humming at her machine, a hymn she reserves for zippers. She didn't ask about the text. She set a mug of tea by my elbow and pushed the box of safety pins closer. An old woman's version of laying out armor. I hemmed 2 pairs of jeans and a navy dress uniform. And at lunch I opened my folder on the back table between the extra spool of white thread and the taped-up box of buttons. The first list was headed, What I've Carried. I wrote the items one by one without decoration. Deposit for Provencher Hall. Maple crib. Gas card top-up in October when Tyler's shift got cut. The $300 transfer I set up last spring, for months that run long. The extra ultrasounds, parking meter coins, groceries when the flu leveled them. I noted the dates, the amounts. The invoice numbers if there were any. A ledger isn't love, but it keeps love from lying to you. By the time I clocked out, I had the quiet certainty that comes when a plan finally chooses its order. I went home, put my bike against the peeling wall of the back stairwell, and sat with the phone like it was a tool, not a siren. Not a weapon, a tool. First call, the credit union. People think banks are interchangeable. They are wrong. A credit union will still put you on hold with the same stale music as anyone else. But the person at the end of the music will remember your name if you've held their line through enough winters. A woman answered. Her voice had that grain you hear in people who also work at the front desk when it's busy. Good afternoon. Prairie Horizons Credit Union. This is Sabine speaking. Hello. This is Marianne Lavoie. I have a supplementary card on my account in my daughter's name. I'd like to cancel it and close the automatic monthly transfer to her checking. I also want to set up a trust for a newborn, disbursements for medical and education only. Is that something we can do here? There was a pause. Not the rude kind, the careful kind. We can certainly cancel the card and the transfer, she said, fingers clicking through a keyboard I could picture. For the trust, we can open a restricted savings account under your name with a beneficiary. Or we can refer you to a partner trustee service that manages distributions according to documented conditions. That piece is a little more formal. I want formal, I said. I want a place where money goes exactly where it says and nowhere else. You'd like the trustee service, she said. We do those on Wednesdays and Fridays. I can book you. And, because you said, supplementary card, just to confirm. You're the primary, yes? The supplementary is a convenience. Not a joint account. Yes, I said. The account is mine. Good, she said, and I heard a kind of relief she didn't mean to share. Then you control it. We do require 24 hours to shut the card off on our system so pending transactions clear. The transfer can be cancelled by end of day. What time works for you to come in about the trust? Friday morning, I said. 9. If you have it. We do. Bring your ID and the beneficiary information you have, name if chosen. Otherwise we can list, grandchild. Baby due March, with the parents' names. We'll draft conditions together. She read me a reference number for the card cancellation. I repeated it and wrote it on my list. The digits sitting there like fence posts set in frozen ground. When we hung up, I breathed the way we do when effort and dignity land in the same place for once. For my second call, I dialed the community hall. The manager, Denise, runs it with the calm of a woman who has seen 100 weddings and knows that most emergencies are just people hearing their own echoes. Provencher Community, she answered, voice already moving through a mental checklist. Hi, Denise. It's Marianne Lavoie. I have the February 10th booking. Deposit in my name. I need to transfer the deposit to a different event, an infant care workshop I'm arranging with Public Health. I can email the confirmation number. Oh, Marianne, of course. We ask for 72 hours written notice to transfer a deposit. Your email is fine. We'll hold it on your account for 6 months if you haven't pinned a date yet. And, just so you know, if the person running the shower calls us about that deposit, we can't discuss it with them. It's under your name. I understand, I said. Thank you. Do you want us to pencil the workshop on the calendar to keep Saturdays in play? She asked. Not yet. I'll call once I've got nurses lined up. I like this plan, she said, and her voice had that small smile decent people keep for shared sense. I sent the email right away with the booking number in the subject line because you don't make other people search for your mess. Then I opened the store receipt for the crib and stared at the return policy like it was a stranger's face I half recognized. Return within 30 days by purchaser only. In original condition. The box was gone. The crib was assembled in my bedroom. Its rails smooth. Its screws snug. But under community partners. The store had printed a line I'd missed before. We partner with approved shelters to accept donations for pickup. Tax receipt issued to purchaser if requested. I clicked the link. And there they were. A list of organizations. Including the women's shelter on Salter that often fills the gap when a mother leaves in a hurry and thinks of everything except where a baby will sleep that first night. I bookmarked the page but did not fill the form. Not yet. You don't let one decision rush the next. The text started that afternoon. First Sharon, in the group chat. Tagging, at all. With a request for final RSVP numbers, so we can keep it elegant and not too crowded. A sentence that managed to be both generous and excluding in the same breath. Then a private message from her. Hi Marianne. Since the grants have most of the logistics in hand now, you can just relax and enjoy the pictures afterwards. We've got the registry covered. Appreciate your enthusiasm though. Appreciation can be a blade if you've been on its wrong side before. I set the phone down and folded a stack of dish towels so straight the edge looked like a rule. Then Tyler texted, 2 short sentences punctuated like he was trying to sound older than he felt. Can you not stir things up this week? Sharon is stressed. We just want the day to go smoothly. I stared at that use of we until the word lost its glue. I typed and erased and typed again. Then settled on something that didn't need an apology attached to it. I'm not stirring. I'm moving my support where it helps the baby. That's all. Hours later, my daughter sent a picture of a cake topper she liked, white script on clear acrylic, and I wrote back that it was pretty. It cost more than my phone bill. I didn't say that part. I try not to stack judgment on top of injury. It's hard enough to carry one thing carefully. Tuesday morning, I went to the seam shop with a head full of numbers and hands that knew what to do anyway. I set in a zipper so clean it disappeared. And then the machine needle snapped and made me laugh out loud. The kind of laugh that comes from being a person and not a plan. I replaced the needle, swept the silver splinters into the spill tray, and went back to work. At noon, I tucked my phone under my scarf and walked to the credit union to sign the form canceling the automatic transfer. Sabine printed it on paper the color of oatmeal. I signed in the neat small hand I've had since high school and kept the top copy for my folder. When I left, I stood for a long minute in the entry vestibule, letting the wind push against the outside door and feeling grateful for simple hinges. By late afternoon, an email from Denise at the hall pinged my phone. Deposit transferred to your account. Marianne, we'll hold it for 6 months under code ML credit. Happy to tentatively set a Saturday with 30-day notice when you're ready. I printed it at the shop and slid it under the elastic in my folder. The way I do with anything I'd rather not lose to a puddle later. That night, Mr. Kowalski watched the Jets and explained, for the 3rd time, how a good line change looks like a sentence with the comma in the right place. I told him he should write a book. He said he was too tired. I tucked a blanket around his knees and wiped the counter in circles while the intermission hosts argued in that polite Canadian way that hides sharp knives in their socks. When I stepped out onto the landing, the cold made my teeth hum. Winnipeg in February is a low, persistent hum. You learn to sing along quietly to keep from thinking it's just your head. Wednesday was for the trust. I arrived at Prairie Horizons Credit Union 5 minutes early because being early is how poor people buy certainty. A man not much older than my daughter came out to the waiting area. Ms. Lavoie? He asked. Careful with the vowels. I'm Aaron. I handle trustee services. He led me into a small glassed-in office with 2 chairs and a potted plant doing its best with January. He spoke the way decent professionals do when they know the power imbalance is not their fault and not their fault. We went through the template. He asked who the beneficiary would be. I said, grandchild. Expected in March. Parents Camille Lavoie and Tyler Grant. He asked what I wanted the funds used for. I said, medical and educational expenses, receipts required, no cash disbursements to adults. He asked who could request disbursements. I said, either parent may submit receipts. The trustee pays providers directly when possible, if reimbursement is needed. Only to the parent who incurred the expense. Never to a third party. He asked about governance. I said I wanted quarterly statements and an annual audit. He asked about succession if I die. I said the trust should continue until the child is 4. Then convert to a small education savings plan. We put it in sentences that would stand up in a room where no one knows my child's nickname or the shape of her laugh. Name for the trust? He asked. He was ready with polite options. Lavoie Grant Infant Support. Prairie Family Trust. I shook my head. Little Maple Trust. I said. No personal names. Maple because it bends and holds. He smiled like he meant it. Little Maple Trust it is. We signed. I initialed. He gave me a copy of the deed so fresh the toner still had that warmed plastic smell. He explained the fees and the notice periods and the online portal. He didn't try to upsell me on anything. When he handed me the final page, he paused. I don't know your situation. He said, and you don't owe me any details. But I will say, this is a very clean way to help a child. It's the only way I can do it and sleep. I said. He nodded and didn't make a face like he understood more than he did. Which is the rarest courtesy in rooms with glass walls. When I stepped back into the cold, a bus heaved by close enough to lift my scarf off my shoulder. I tucked the trust folder under my arm like a diploma and walked into the day. There's a particular sound paper makes when it matters. It talks to your coat with a dry whisper that says, keep me flat. Don't bend me. I survive in tidy spaces. I caught the shop door with my foot and slid back behind the counter just as a woman came in wanting a hem, by Friday if at all possible. I said yes because I was in a yes mood and because the rent is not impressed by moral victories. That afternoon, the group chat erupted with RSVPs. Balloon colors, and a debate about whether shower games are childish or required by some law of nature. I turned off notifications. When you've made a plan that stretches over the rest of your life, you have to be careful not to let other people's glitter pull you sideways. At home, I took the crib's instruction booklet from the drawer and folded it into the donation folder. It felt like a goodbye to the picture I'd had of myself standing beside my daughter in a room where women laughed and ate too many cookies under fluorescent lights. Some pictures ruin themselves when you try to stand inside them. You put them back in the envelope and let other pictures find you. Thursday came with a sky the color of yesterday's dishwater. I went to the seam shop and spent 2 hours repairing the cuff of a coat so worn the lining had the sheen of old satin. Its owner left a note with it, please mend if possible. My dad's. I wear it when I miss him. I did a proper job and charged less than I should. Which is to say I charged what they could manage. When the bell rang in the lull after lunch, I looked up expecting a customer and found my daughter. She looked as if she'd run from the bus. Breath fogging, hair not quite settled under her hat. I'm sorry to come here, she said, already bracing. I smiled and walked her to the back where the ironing board leans against the freezer and privacy gathers like steam. I got your message about the trust, she said. Tyler's mom says you're making things complicated. She says you're trying to control us with money. She says it's manipulative. People put sharp words in other people's mouths when they don't want to swallow them themselves. I folded my hands so I wouldn't use them to underline. I'm not trying to control you. I said. I'm trying to stop having my support used a way that erases me. The trust means the baby gets what the baby needs. It also means I'm not funding anyone's aesthetic. She flinched at that and then exhaled. I know, she said, and I believed her. I want everything to be easy. Easy is when the thing that's true and the thing that's convenient are the same thing. I said, that almost never happens on a schedule. She held my gaze for a long second that felt like the best kind of thaw. Sharon says I should uninvite you officially. In writing. So there's no confusion. Her voice wobbled on officially like it didn't fit in her mouth. You sent me a message. I said. I understood it. I'm sorry, she said again. And I believed her again. And I didn't repair the hole you can see when a daughter is trying to be a good woman to two mothers at once. The stitches she needs are ones she has to make with her own thread. After she left, I finished pinning a cuff and cleaned the lint trap on the industrial serger because today, of all days, felt like a day lint might catch fire if left to its own selfishness. At home, I warmed a bowl of cabbage soup from the freezer and read the trust deed line by line until the words stopped pretending to be a foreign language. I copied the disbursement email address onto a recipe card and taped it inside the pantry with the flour measurements. Some things you want in arm's reach. How to thicken a gravy. How to pay a pediatrician without touching the pride of the adult who should have covered the bill. That night, Sharon emailed me. People show their tells by how they sign emails. Lots of exclamation points. No greeting. Or those breezy cheers that say more about Instagram than about bodies in rooms. Hers was clipped. Marianne. We've heard you've cancelled certain financial arrangements and are contacting venues. This is unnecessarily dramatic and stressful for Camille. Please refrain from interfering with plans already made. I suggest you contribute through our gift registry. That would be simplest. Sharon. I read it once. Then again. Then I closed my laptop and sat in the chair by the window where a thin line of cold sneaks through the caulking. I thought of all the ways simplicity has been used to absolve people of practicing good manners. I thought of all the times I've been told I'm dramatic for doing something in daylight that others preferred I continued to do in the kind dark. Then I opened the laptop and wrote back one sentence. Sharon. I will not be using any arrangement that allows my support to be repackaged as someone else's generosity. I deleted the second sentence I wanted to write, the one about registries and the price of clear acrylic cake toppers, and hit send. Friday morning at 9, I sat in the credit union again. This time to initial a small change Erin had suggested. Language that required invoices to be named and dated within 60 days of service so no one could backfill a story into the trust. He slid me the new page with a finger that had a paper cut wrapped in a band-aid. People talk about bankers like they're a species apart. But they bleed on their own copies. 2. When I left, I bought a pack of stamps from the Shoppers Drug Mart downstairs and mailed a thank you card to the public health nurse who'd agreed to lead the workshop at the hall when I picked a date. Tell new moms. Naps are strategic. Not sentimental, I wrote, and laughed at my own joke in the lobby like someone finally told me a secret. The day before the shower, I did one more thing. I went to the baby store. The one with the pretty windows and the staff who call you, Mama, if you let them. And I asked to speak to the manager. A young man with a halo of bad sleep under his eyes came over. He had the grace to talk to me without the sales voice. I purchased a crib from you 3 weeks ago, I said, giving him the order number. It's assembled and in perfect condition. I don't want a refund. I want it picked up and donated to a shelter. I'll take the receipt for tax purposes. He blinked. then nodded like he'd been expecting a return, but not this kind of return. "We can do that," he said. "We'll send the driver this weekend. You'll get an email with the pickup window and the donation receipt once the shelter signs the form." "Which organization do you prefer?" I gave him the name. He typed it in. "We work with them," he said. "They're fast." "Good," I said. "There's a baby who needs a bed right now. Mine will have a bed later." He looked me in the eye as if someone had finally handed him a sentence worth saying. "I wish more people were as clear as you. Clarity isn't heroism. It's expensively purchased peace." I signed the form, thanked him, and walked home past cars wearing their snow-like hats no one wants to take off indoors. At my building, I met my neighbor, Mrs. Doyle, on the stairs, and we swapped weather and casserole ideas like currency. She has lived here since the 70s and says Winnipeg is easier now in some ways and worse in others. Which is likely true of everything that still breathes. That evening, the group chat filled with exclamation marks and photos of folded napkins. I opened each one and tapped a small heart out of habit because my daughter's baby will one day love photos of the day people smiled, regardless of who paid the light bill. Then I packed a cloth bag with the receiving blanket I'd sewn and a small card addressed to Little Maple, with the trust details printed on it. I placed the bag by the door. I had no intention of walking into a room where I'd been told to stay away. But I know events. Something always goes sideways. A person prepared to stand in a hallway can be the difference between hurt that lingers and hurt that merely stings. I slept better than I had all week. The kind of sleep you get when your lists are in order and the winter has finally chosen a temperature. In the morning, I made oatmeal with raisins for myself and left the pot on a low heat because I have learned that comfort can be caught later like a bus you thought you missed. I sat at the table, folded my hands, and looked at the 3 papers that had moved this week: credit union cancellation, trust deed, hall confirmation. They didn't look like justice. They looked like work. That's the kind of justice that lasts around here. Before noon, my phone buzzed with a message from the store. Pickup window 2 to 4 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you for your donation. Another from the credit union, Little Maple Trust, account established. Statement options attached. And then, as if all of Manitoba had conspired to write a punchline, a third from Denise at the hall. Marianne received a call asking about deposit. I confirmed we can only discuss with depositor. Your credit holds. See you soon for that workshop. I put on my coat and walked to the bridge. Because that's what I do when I need to hear what water sounds like under the ice. It sounded like patience. It sounded like your own heart when you finally decided to stop asking strangers to hold it for you. I leaned on the rail and let the cold go through the metal into my gloves. Somewhere past the skyline, a gust shoved a stray grocery bag along a drift. And the bag tumbled, caught, and lay still. There's a temptation now to call what I had done revenge. It would be satisfyingly sharp to use that word. But the truth is plainer and harder. This was housekeeping. I moved my money to the room where a baby will sleep. I shut a door that kept banging and called it a draft. I wrote my name on the things I stand behind and removed it from the places it was being used to decorate someone else's picture. I did it slowly, so nothing fell on the floor. If there is drama in that, it is the quiet kind. The kind a woman learns by picking up pins one by one off a rug before anyone steps barefooted into the room. When I turned back toward home, the cloud cover had thinned in that false way February offers, light without warmth. I took the stairs 2 at a time because the kettle had to be reminded of its purpose. I set my phone on the counter, lined up my 3 papers again without meaning to, and wrote on a sticky note I pressed to the fridge. Saturday, starch courage. Sunday, hold your line. A woman with good starch can make an old shirt look like it knows what it's doing. The rest of this story would require some pressing. By evening, I'd sewn a label into the corner of the receiving blanket, a mon petite. To my little one. It's ridiculous and sentimental and thoroughly out of fashion. I don't care. When you separate your love from your access, you need to leave itself little breadcrumbs so it can find its way in the dark. I fell asleep to the sound of a plow throwing up a ridge outside my window and the building answering with a clunk in the pipes. In the morning, I would not be standing in a room with sage balloons and the soft pretense that women are always kind to each other when cake is present. I would be ready in a hallway with a cloth bag and the kind of boundaries that look like a door that can open or close depending on who's asking and how they knock. Because here's a thing I know that no acrylic sign can tell you. Babies don't need parties. They need places to sleep. Milk that shows up. Adults who mean what they say and do not turn each other into decorations. The rest is noise you can turn down with one good twist of the dial. And in the quiet between closing the notebook and turning off the light, I saw the first edges of what the day after would feel like. A knock on a door. A room that goes still for a breath. A woman who prefers receipts to speeches asking politely for 60 seconds of a crowd's attention. I didn't plan the words exactly, good sentences are shy and hate to be rehearsed, but I heard their shape. They sounded like winter work done calmly under a fluorescent light. They sounded like a crib leaving one house and arriving in another. They sounded like the exact length of time it takes to put a baby down without waking them. Which is to say, just long enough. And no longer. Some gatherings feel like they were built out of air freshener and careful smiles. You can tell by the way people hold their cups, 2 hands. Elbows tight, like the liquid is the most interesting part. I arrived to the Provencher Community Hall early. Not to sneak in or make a scene, but to stand on the periphery where a person can see how the day is stitched. A Saturday in February. Winnipeg doing its gray impression of tenderness. The kind that settles on your hat brim and makes your breath visible whether you meant it to be or not. The parking lot was half ice, half gravel. I chose my steps. You don't spend decades in this city and forget how to walk. Inside, the air had that familiar mix of floor wax and old coffee. Volunteers were hustling. Folding chairs bristled like a small forest along the back wall. A handmade sign pointed to gifts, with an arrow that seemed too cheerful for its assignment. Over the stage, a rented acrylic script read "Oh Baby" in a font that tried hard to be delighted. Sage green balloons, the exact hue that had been discussed at such length in the group chat, stood obedient in their arch. Someone had done a good job. I have no quarrel with competence in service of unnecessary things. A woman from Sharon's side, an aunt, I think, was arranging cookies shaped like onesies on a 3-tiered stand. We smiled at each other with that polite prairie acknowledgement that says we will coexist for the next 2 hours and neither of us will make it harder than it has to be. My plan was simple. Place the cloth bag I'd packed the night before, receiving blanket folded like a letter. The little maple trust information printed clean, near the book where guests write wishes. Then leave. I wasn't a guest. I was the person who had been told not to be. I meant to honor the invitation exactly as it had been written. I set the bag down where the tablecloth puckered and smoothed it with my palm. Denise, the hall manager, passed by with a clipboard, her pencil tucked into the band of her ponytail. She gave me a look that landed like a hand on a shoulder. "We're good," she murmured, as if confirming the weather with me. I nodded. Under the table, an extension cord snaked toward a power bar. The electrical version of what we all do for each other on such days. Make something reach a little farther than it was designed to. Sharon arrived carrying flowers that did the rhetorical work of an apology without having to say one. Her hair was set, her scarf precise. She saw me and did a small double take. The kind you hope no one else notices. I watched her decide in a single breath that ignoring me would be kinder to her plans than acknowledging I existed. I applauded her strategy. It's hard to argue with a woman who believes the story lives where the camera points. Tyler followed, hauling a tote with the casual strength of a man who thinks gravity is for other people. He looked older than he had last week. Not wise. Exactly. Just more alert to the mathematics of errands. He said hello. I said hello back. Because there are courtesies that have nothing to do with where you place balloons. When Camille walked in, that breath my body had been holding all morning let go without asking permission. She wore a sweater that tried to hide what could not be hidden and did a poor job of it. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. Our eyes met, and in that small exchange I saw the whole map of the last month, the detours, the regrets, the way a person tries to be two daughters at once and ends up exhausted in both directions. I didn't walk to her. I didn't wave. We are learning to live with a fence that keeps rabbits out and dignity in. Guests trickled in, someone's perfume louder than the music, someone's laughter testing the seams of the room. I drifted to the entrance where the air felt more honest. From there, the day rearranged itself into small routines. A cousin took the coats and forgot which chair she'd used for which size. Two teenagers fussed with a tripod for a photo corner, and pretended not to mind when the thing kept sliding lower. Denise rode herd on a coffee urn that had decided it was done. All the human business that keeps events from falling into the kind of chaos people remember more eagerly than they should. The program began. Maureen, the same Maureen who had chaired that committee in Greywater in another life of mine, does not live here. But a woman very much like her took the microphone and proved, once again, that teachers are the only ones who should be allowed to speak to rooms without training. She welcomed friends and family, in a voice that was both tidy and kind. Sharon followed with a smile that tried to be both. Her opening line included the phrase, keeping it simple, which made me want to check the invoice for the acrylic sign again. She thanked everyone who helped, in a way that kept Thanksgiving far from verbs. My name did not need to be said. I had long since pulled it from places where it made someone else's story sound more generous than it was. I meant to leave just then. The right timing in these things is the moment your absence will be a sentence only to you. But the door opened and the winter did its little gasp at the warmth. And a woman entered with her coat half-buttoned, pushing a stroller that had known better days. She didn't come to this shower. She came for the drop-in program that usually uses the hall on Saturdays and had not read the sign on the door. Denise stepped over, explained, and smiled the smile that makes bad news not become worse news. The woman apologized, then noticed the table of cookies and flinched in a way I recognize from every pantry doorway I've stood in when I have nothing to offer but something I can't hide wanting. Denise caught my eye, and in the small economy of decency we practice here, I slid over and asked if she wanted to sit for a minute. Stroller parked near the heaters so the baby could nap. We're finishing soon, I said. You can come back for the program at 2. She nodded, embarrassed and grateful in the same small space. I poured her a coffee, more milk than coffee, and placed 2 cookies on a napkin like I was passing contraband. The world did not tilt on its axis. It breathed better. The gifts portion started late because gifts always claim more time than we think we owe them. They sat in pastel piles, packages wrapped with the kind of ribbon that asks for scissors. Gift bags large enough to house a teenager if he crouched. The host announced that the big reveal would be the crib from Nana, and the room made the sound rooms make when they've been prepped to applaud. I felt a peculiar stillness, like the instant before a rubber band gives up its job. Sharon nodded to Tyler. He took out his phone to cue a video, clearly planned footage of the crib. Probably set to a song about sunshine. He frowned, scrolled, whispered to the host. The host repeated the motion people repeat when their script has lost a page. Sharon's smile thinned in that way smiles do when they have to work for their supper. "Looks like we might be out of order," the host chirped, and reached for a smaller package like a magician misdirecting an audience from an empty hat. But the cousin in charge of the registry app, an earnest girl who probably gets blisters from doing the right thing, called out, "It says, refunded, donated," because the truth sometimes skips the courtesy line. The room went quiet the way church halls do when the microphone squeals, instantly and with a touch of self-shame. Sharon turned toward me for the first time that day, not because she meant to, but because she followed the line of the sound to where a story might be hiding. If this were television, I would have stood up then and delivered a speech people would quote at each other in the comments section. Real rooms don't like speeches. They like sentences they can hold. I didn't move fast. I walked to the front like a person who is asked to read a prayer at a service she didn't plan. I asked the host for the microphone for just a minute, and she handed it over the way women hand each other infants on buses, with faith born of necessity. "Hello," I said, and my voice came back to me flat and polite, the way all microphones make us sound. "I'm Marianne. I won't take your time. I want to clear a small confusion so the day can do the job it's here to do." I breathed once. Somewhere at the back, the coffee urn ticked in disapproval. I kept my eyes on a point beyond the acrylic script. "I bought a crib," I said. "A good one. I assembled it. It is not here because it left my apartment this morning on a truck. It's going to a shelter across town. A baby will sleep there tonight who would not have otherwise. I didn't do that to embarrass anyone. I did it because I was told, in writing, that I did not belong at this event. I believe people when they tell me where they want me to stand." I held up a sheet of paper, the colorless kind that survives filing cabinets. "From today forward, the support I give for this child will come through a trust, Little Maple. It pays for things babies need, medical, education. It pays vendors or reimburses parents with receipts. It does not buy balloons or signs. It does not buy me a chair. It keeps us honest. If you need formula or a stroller or childcare so you can go to your appointment, the trust will help. If you need an RSVP to get a seat at a table, ask someone else. I'll be in the hallway with the blanket when the room empties and the baby is tired." I handed the microphone back. My heart did not slam. It worked like a machine that had been serviced on schedule. The room exhaled in small, separate pockets. People tell you spaces are held together by charisma. It's not true. They are held together by the courage not to make a catastrophe where a correction will do. Sharon colored, then steadied herself with that social poise she wears like a winter boot. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said quickly, aiming the sentence toward the crowd so it might not have to pass through me. "We didn't expect any changes." Tyler stared at the gift table as if he could will it to rearrange itself. Camille cried, "And if I tell you it wasn't theatrical? I trust you to believe me. It wasn't the heaving of someone auditioning for sympathy. It was the small leak a person makes when she realizes the shape of a mistake. I did not go to her. A mother can rescue a child from cold. She cannot rescue her from the cost of learning." The host, bless the hosts of this world, clapped her hands lightly and said we would take a 5-minute break. Use the washroom. Refill coffee. And then open gifts because babies come on their own schedules and will need onesies either way. The sound of chairs and cups filled the gap. A cousin made a joke about the Jets that someone laughed at because laughing at sports is easier than at anything else. Denise appeared with a roll of tape and said something quietly to the teenagers about the tripod that made them look proud. I stepped away from the center and went to the edge where the hall meets the coachroom. The woman with the stroller, the one who'd come by mistake, stood with me. More linger than lurk. My first slept in a drawer. She said, unsentimental. We put blankets in so she wouldn't roll. I nodded. A drawer is a start. A crib is better. Yeah, she said, and we shared the small smile of people who prefer accuracy to slogans. I placed the cloth bag with the blanket into Camille's hands as she passed me on her way to the washroom. For later, I said, it's warm. She nodded and did not look at me for fear she'd unravel again. Then squeezed my fingers so quick I might have thought I imagined it if the place itched afterward in the pleasant way of an old bruise. Tyler, trailing her, muttered, thanks. His tone more a question than a gratitude. I answered with a look that meant, you are not my enemy. Just a man who will have to learn a new kind of keeping score. When the program resumed, it did so in the faintly ridiculous way programs do when real life has sliced them open. People overcompensated with enthusiasm. A game about guessing baby food flavors provoked noises no food deserves. A poem that tried to be gentle landed on the wrong beats. The gifts were unwrapped and cooed over. Every "ah" was slightly too loud. Every thanks slightly too long. It is not a failure of character to paper over a draft. It is how we survive a winter of the heart while the furnace catches up. I stayed until there was nothing left for me to correct and then left. The cold outside felt bracing in that way that tells you your coat is doing its job. I walked past the bakery where the windows fog with sugar and heat. Past the pharmacy where my name was once stapled to a paper bag of antibiotics. Past the bus stop where two teenagers shared a headphone and pretended they were invisible. On the Provencher Bridge, a gust tried to push me a step sideways. I took the step, then straightened, because that is the exact choreography of a life in this place. Bend. Then hold. At home. The apartment welcomed me with the small talk of radiators and the honesty of a room that does not know how to make a person larger than she is. I hung up my coat, set my keys in the dish, and boiled water because ceremony is for people who never had to thaw one. The kettle sang. I poured. I sat. My phone buzzed with a message from the baby store. Donation delivered. Thank you for giving a safe sleep space. A second message followed from the shelter with a photo, just the crib assembled in a room with peeling paint and a nightlight shaped like a moon. No baby in the picture. And thank God for that. I don't want to see anyone's hardship curated. I want to know that somewhere tonight, a spit-up rag will be sweet with milk and not fear. Sharon's email arrived later. It was longer than her first. And though the sentences tried for lawyerly, there was weariness in the joints. I regret. It began, and I set it aside. You can teach a person to use the word regret. You cannot teach it to start in the right order. Tyler texted me a string of practical questions about the trust, each one more human than he meant to be. I answered every one with the same grace I use when showing a man how to measure a hem, straight. Not superior. He wrote finally. Okay, I get it. I'm trying. I believed him. Trying isn't a trophy. It's a door that will open if you keep pushing. Camille called near bedtime. Not a text. A call. Voice raw. Practical. Will they really pick up the receipts? She asked. They will. I said, take a picture. Send it to the email on the card. If they need more information, they'll ask. It's boring. Good. she said. Boring sounds, safe. We didn't speak long. You cannot rebuild a bridge in one phone call. You check the pilings and note which boards will need replacing in spring. Before we hung up, she said, I'm sorry, and I said, I know, and we left it there. Not as a bruise, but as a note someone will add to later when their hands are warmer. In the days that followed, life did not transform itself into a fable. The community hall processed my deposit transfer with the perfunctory efficiency of an office that has learned to outlast weddings. The public health nurse wrote back with 2 possible dates for the workshop and a list of topics that made me embarrassingly happy: safe sleep, postpartum moods, practical feeding, where to find free lactation help. The credit union sent me a welcome packet for the trust with a paper statement I didn't need and carefully filed anyway. At the seam shop, we hemmed 6 pairs of pants, adjusted a bridesmaid dress that wanted to be too honest, and repaired a jacket whose zipper had given up hiding its failings. People in the community made their choices. A few of the grants avoided my eyes in Safeway like I was a bad advertisement that might smear if they looked too long. One aunt with a sensible haircut thanked me without naming what for. 2 of Camille's friends messaged to say they had been wrong to keep quiet and asked how to help at the workshop. Sharon did not call. I did not expect her to. Pride is a winter coat she paid good money for. It will take until spring to admit it doesn't fit. The crib made its way into a story I will never hear. That is how help should travel, away from you. Every time I think of it, I picture a wall a little less empty and the air around a baby's head a little softer from the way wood holds warmth. The registry continued to buzz with purchases. Those who wanted to help found ways. Those who wanted to be seen helping found ways that were shinier. Babies don't care where the camera points. They care that a bottle is warm and clean and that a human smells like someone who will stay. What did this cost me? Less than pretending would have. More than staying quiet for another 6 months. The truth always comes with a bill. Mine was written in small items. A cake I didn't eat. A chair I didn't sit in. A thank you I didn't hear. A soft interruption in a morning that otherwise would have passed without incident. In return, I bought myself back a piece of dignity the size of a kitchen table. I set my mug on it, and it didn't wobble. If I have a moral to offer, not the syrup-thick kind that leaves your mouth sticky, but the kind you can fold and carry in your coat, it is this. Kindness without boundaries is a kind of bankruptcy. You can spend yourself into someone else's story so deep you forget which bills were yours. Boundaries without kindness are a desert where nothing grows. Some people use the word revenge for what happens when a woman stops being furniture. I don't. Revenge wants a reaction. I wanted a receipt. I have heard the argument that I should have swallowed my pride and shown up anyway. I could have. I have swallowed worse things. But you can't feed a baby on swallowed pride. You can feed them on a trust that pays the clinic and a crib that does not squeak and a grandmother who knows the difference between being included and being useful. I chose useful. It tastes better. And it keeps longer. Camille and I are finding our footholds again. We take small walks on days the snowpack invites it. We make lists that shape themselves into names. When she laughs and then winces because the baby rolled in a way that knocked her breath sideways. I put my hand on her back until the air returns to its job. We talk about spring, about the river breaking free, about strollers on the path and sun on cheeks. We do not talk about acrylic signs. That is a future I have released back to the people who need it. In St. Boniface, the seasons tell their own long joke: winter. Still winter. More winter. Construction. The work of repair is loud and inconvenient. You curse the cones until you feel how smooth the road lies under your tires in October. Families are the same. You don't get the peace without the part where someone stands with a flag at the edge of a lane and says, "Slow down. One direction at a time." The workshop at the hall will happen next month. Denise confirmed a Saturday. The nurse will bring plastic dolls and a stack of pamphlets nobody keeps but everybody remembers a line from. I will make coffee that is stronger than we deserve and lay out blankets on the floor. If Sharon comes, I will hand her a cup and ask about her week. If she doesn't, the door will still open. It was built for more than one pair of hands. Maybe that's what I wanted to say all along and didn't yet have the words for. Doors are for coming and going. They are not for locking a mother out of a room she paid for and then naming it taste. If you are going to tell someone she does not belong at the party, know that she might take back the chair she brought and place it where a tired person can sit without paying admission. If that feels like a lesson, I don't mind being its author. I've taught harder things to teenagers with dress zippers an hour before the dance. We'll see who we are when the baby arrives. People change under the gravity of a small person who doesn't care who wins arguments. I have space in my life for other adults to surprise me. Until then, I will keep the trust paperwork in a folder where pasta recipes used to go when I could afford to experiment. I will answer calls from the clinic and emails from the credit union with the same quiet voice I used to reassure a stranger on a bad night shift. I will buy diapers on sale and keep a package by the door because emergencies prefer ground floors. I will write my name on the back of the receiving blanket in tiny stitches so small only the person folding it will ever notice. I will show up where I am helpful and leave when the room tells me it needs to practice manners without supervision. People say babies bring families together. Sometimes they bring us to the precise distance at which we can be kind without breaking. That's still a kind of together. I can live with that. In a city where we measure ourselves by how often we help push a stranger's car out of a snowbank, it counts. If you've listened this far, maybe you've been the person with the receipt no one wanted to read out loud. Maybe you've stood in a doorway and wondered whether kindness means staying or stepping back. I can't tell you what to do in your house. I can tell you that I sleep better when my help travels on paper that doesn't lie. And when I walk across the bridge and feel the wind try to move me, I let it adjust my footfall. Then I hold the rail and continue. You don't argue with gusts. You don't hand them the map. Either.